Greetings. Welcome to Elect Connect, a candidate forum brought to you by the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce. I'm Mary Morgan, Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the Chamber. And right now we're joined we're talking with John Zody, who is a Democratic Party candidate for State Senate District 40. First, before we get started, I would like to welcome our sponsors and thank them for their support, without which this work would not be possible. Those sponsors include German American Bank, Bunger and Robertson, the City of Bloomington, Hoosier Energy, Indiana University, and Smithville. And again, we'll be talking to John Zody, running for State Senate in District 40. Welcome, John.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thanks to the Chamber and all your sponsors for doing this. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I'd like to start by just asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in running for this office.
Sure, thanks for the question. Well, my name is John Zody, as Mary mentioned. I'm running for State Senate District 40. I am a native of this area. I grew up in Martinsville. My family's lived in Indiana for about 200 years. Came to Monroe County and Morgan County within about 10 years of each other back in the 1830s and 40s. And so deep roots in this area. For the last 20 years, I've worked in public service and federal and state government, higher education. I'm an adjunct instructor at Indiana University, worked for Ivy Tech here on the Bloomington campus. And been involved with a number of community organizations, the Board of Zoning Appeals for the city, Leadership Bloomington, Monroe County, lots of different organizations around. Obviously, my involvement in politics has had a big influence on my professional background and experience. And so I'm running for State Senate because I think our state's best days are ahead of it. There are 5 specific issues I'm running on: living wages, protecting public education, expanding voting rights, protecting the environment through the issue of environmental sustainability, and making sure that people in this state are protected safely and equally under the law in Indiana. In addition, we need to make sure we're preventing gun violence and maintaining access to affordable health care for every Hoosier out there. And so, I've been around the State House a lot. I've been to every county in Indiana, know a lot about its communities. And my first job out of college was in community development. And so really have a passion for that and seeing communities improve, and would love to represent this area in the State Senate, to represent the citizens and the businesses and the organizations in Monroe County. I believe customer service or politics is a customer service business. So I have a lot of experience in constituent services, and making sure that I would be a responsive state senator is a big goal of mine. And I think this is a customer service business, and would strive to be a good representative, not only on policy, but also with making sure people in this area know what kind of resource their state government can be.
Okay, thanks. Well, as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is one of the big issues for businesses in our district. What additional assistance do you think the state should provide for local businesses during this time?
Yeah, I think, I was reading a little bit about this, and I mentioned it in my questionnaire. I think direction and certainty is the very best thing that the state can do. That's something that's in sort of their wheelhouse right now. We're talking on April 29th. On Friday, we'll have a stay-at-home order that expires, and I think people are going to be looking for direction and certainty about what that means. If I may, not being a business owner myself, but I do believe my experience has taught me that certainty is a good thing, both economically and for a community. And so I think that's the first thing I would say about what state government could be doing, is providing that certainty. I think financially, however the state can assist with the loan process. I was reading about that a little bit, and with the process with the Small Business Administration, the 2 bills that have passed and been signed into law, the Paycheck Protection Act and the CARES Act, making sure that information is out there and that businesses have access to that and understand the process. I understand there is some possible confusion with the process and how lenders are able to process those loans, and what the SBA is doing to make that more efficient. And I think that's something every government entity should be stepping up and making sure people have the best information. For employees and for employers, I think knowing resources about possible unemployment benefits and all that kind of stuff to make sure that we are keeping a focus on the fact that everything is a system, and if an employer is having issues, their employees probably are too. And so what do the employees need? I think Bloomington has a really good safety net, but we're in an unprecedented time here. And so I think state government is right in the middle of all that, and whatever resources they can continue to provide. I think it starts with the Department of Workforce Development, providing that certainty and really education on the process. And I know they've been trying to do that, but they just have to keep doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on a somewhat related note, the state legislature, as you know, is moving into a budget year, and very likely we'll see decreased revenues. Assuming that revenues are down significantly, what priorities would you identify for cuts, and what parts of the budget do you think need more support, not less?
Sure. Well, since I filled out my questionnaire and I was asked this question in a similar fashion at another opportunity, and I think it was asking the question about the surplus in the context of that. And so we will be coming into a budget year. We've got to see what the revenue forecasts will tell us going into the 2021 fiscal year for the 2021-2022 fiscal years for the budget. So I've worked in state government where we went through a recession. I was furloughed a day a month as a state employee. There were cuts to different things around state government. I think we've got to identify what the surplus can be used for, so that we don't have to cut essential services. This is not a time to be cutting essential services. And so if we see a big hit in revenue going into the next budget cycle, priorities are going to have to shift. And so I've also worked in a state agency where we were asked to revert money. So the state legislature appropriates money for an agency, and I think we had to do a 2 or 3% reversion that year. So I think you have to look at all of those things from the standpoint of what the state legislature can do in identifying the budget. I would first look at the surplus. I know some of that may be used for the response to the pandemic, but I don't think we can afford to cut those essential services like healthcare, those basic safety net services. And I would say that once we've identified what responses are going to need to protect that safety net in response to the pandemic, I would immediately move to education. I don't think that public education can afford any more cuts. There are things state government can do to be more efficient, and if that does come down to asking certain agencies to revert, asking state employees to go on furlough once a month, those are all things the state legislature would look at, but also that the administration would have to look at too, in response to what the state budget agency would recommend as the biennium continues. So it'd be a pretty complicated process to get that budget passed and make sure that we are identifying revenue sources if revenue were to decline and be on a continued decline going into the budget session.
Okay, thanks. Well, this is a member question. In light of decreased tax revenues that we're anticipating due to the COVID-19 pandemic, would you consider legalizing marijuana? Why or why not?
Sure, I would consider it. I believe that and I will say that the response to this at your member forum when you had the legislators was there were a lot of yeses there. The green side of the card was there rather than the red side. I was interested to see that. So first of all, I think we have to focus on decriminalization of marijuana, and medical marijuana as a priority. For me, as far as tax revenues go, the context of the question is, would I consider legalizing recreational? I would consider it. I'm open to it. I do think there's some things that we need to think about ahead of time. So I've heard people talk about sort of a road test. I mean, it is a substance, and so I think should be viewed in that context. So I think there are a lot of things we need to look at before recreational marijuana was legalized. I do believe that sort of taking out the tax question for the benefit of the community, and I think it is a criminal justice issue that we don't have that is not decriminalized, and I think for a health issue that we don't have medical marijuana are higher priorities than legalizing recreational. But I understand that this question where it could be a new revenue source, I do think there's some things we need to talk about before that would be done, though.
Okay, great, thanks. In the past, we've seen tension between the state legislature and local governments, particularly in Bloomington, as you know.
Mhm.
What's your view of Indiana's Home Rule Act, and how do you determine when the state should step in and take action to limit local government?
Yeah, this has been a big issue over the last number of years. Excuse me. Um, I don't think the General Assembly has really respected the home rule that communities should have, quite frankly. I think there are a number of issues, not only taxes. I know we dealt with the annexation issue here. There are lots of things where lots of issues where local officials feel like the state is telling them what to do. State government has to be, just like any government, has to try to be consistent, but also respect local communities. And I just think that the legislature may have focused a little too much on consistency rather than understanding regionalism and what counties and communities need to do. I think communities have figured that out, right? So I will always go back to Ivy Tech in this analogy that Ivy Tech does a very good job at regionalism, where the Bloomington campus here, when I worked there, focused on here are the students we have, here are the degrees that we can offer, here are the industries that can hire them. That is a regional approach, and I think that works well. And I think the General Assembly could do a little better to focus on encouraging regionalism instead of just sort of saying this is what we're going to do and you're going to have to do it. So I don't think home rule has been respected very much.
Um, in many ways, state legislators, especially in the minority party, have limited influence here in Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan to approach your work so that your constituents would have a voice in state government?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would do is reach out to my fellow legislators in this area. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in Martinsville, so I know Peggy Mayfield a little bit, for instance. But I think it's critical for us as a group to get together to communicate regularly about the issues that impact the district. There's going to be ideology that we differ on, right? Some of those big issue policies that Republicans and Democrats are going to have fundamental disagreements on. I get that. I think it'd be unrealistic to expect anything else. However, there are issues that are not partisan that impact this district. And so if I were elected, myself and Matt Pierce would be Democrats, hopefully would be joined by some other Democrats speaking politically. But if there was still a bipartisan representation delegation for Monroe County, we have to work together. And there are issues that are not partisan, like I said, in this community. So that's the first thing I would do, is reach out to Bob Heaton and Jeff Ellington and Eric Cook and Peggy Mayfield and Matt and all the folks that represent this area as well as the surrounding areas around Monroe County, and figure out what we need to do to work for the region. This community did that when Crane was going through the BRAC process. That's one example where everybody just pulled together and understood the importance of that and worked together, and it was successful. And so I was involved a little bit with that, but there are examples where we can do that and work together, and I think we have to do that. And I think I could find some common ground with other legislators around the state. Like I mentioned, I've been to every county here in our state. I've worked on community projects in a vast number of them. So I feel like I know a little bit about everybody's district, wherever they come from in the state. And I feel like I could maybe relate a little bit and figure out ways to work together. I think environmental sustainability is one of those issues that we can measure, and everybody can kind of grab a hold of something with environmental sustainability and say, let's measure what we're doing. Let's look at it. Somewhere in the state, a community is doing something that can be measured. And I think that's a tangible with how to tackle the environmental protection issue. Businesses are doing it. I think that's one thing I would love to go talk to legislators across the aisle and say, is there something we could talk about here that is in the realm of sustainability and what your community or your district might be doing? Because I know people are doing it. We just have to measure it.
Great. Well, it's time to wrap up. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity. I've had good conversations during this campaign, including with the chamber, and I've appreciated the information that I've gotten from your organization, and I've appreciated the dialogue. I think we're in an unprecedented environment right now, and anytime our our candidates out there can be given the opportunity to present their issues and their campaigns. I appreciate that very much, and appreciate the chamber and your sponsors engaging in this before the June 2nd primary, which has been moved. It would otherwise be next Tuesday, but it's now June 2nd. And so everybody's adapting, and appreciate just the opportunity to do this, Mary.
Great. Well, thank you again. We've been talking with John Zody. He is running in the Democratic Party primary on June 2nd as a candidate for Indiana State Senate race District 40. Once again, we'd like to thank our Elect Connect sponsors, German American Bank, Bunger Robertson, the City of Bloomington, Hoosier Energy, Indiana University, and Smithville. And then another reminder to vote on June 2nd in the primary. And this year, all voters are eligible to vote by mail. I would encourage you to do that. You can find more information on the Monroe County election site at monroecountyvoters.us and on our chamber website, chamberbloomington.org/2020-primary-election. Thanks again.